Great to start. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where we explore the mind, body, wellness, personal growth, and the transformation. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a kind of, you can say, fascinating discussion on how the East and West view and treat mental health. That's amazing, right? Yes. So, first thing, like, are we all, only addressing the symptoms, or we are truly healing the source of our struggles? That's a great question, right? So, joining me is someone, uh, I'll introduce you, but let me first take her name. Joining me is Amita Ghosh. So, welcome to the show, Amita.
Hi, so glad to be here.
Lovely, lovely. So, Amita, like before we start delving into this topic, this is really a great topic. And before we do that, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Amita is a psychotherapist, coach, and retreat leader, blending the Eastern philosophy with Western psychology. Yes. So, with over 30 years of experience, she specializes in trauma recovery, mindfulness, and yoga therapy, helping the individuals breaking free from the stress and find balance. So, I'll not take much of your time. So, without further ado, let's welcome Amita again to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Avik. I'm so excited about this topic. This is so close to my heart. I grew up in India. And so, growing up in India, you're just kind of naturally
Hmm.
exposed to all of the information, the philosophies, and things like that. But you don't even have to study it, you just know about it. And my higher education in psychology was in the US. And that is a very different approach to mental health and psychology. So I've been very fortunate to be able to combine the two together. So I'm going to leave it at that and let you ask me questions, or is there anything else that you want me to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. So, because as we are discussing about the Eastern and the Western thing, so I'll start with the Western one. So, Western psychology often kind of focuses on the managing the symptoms, while on the Eastern part, the Eastern traditions emphasizes on the deeper healing. So, how do these two approaches differ basically, and where do they complement each other? What do you say?
So you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
Western psychology looks a lot at symptoms. You know, what are the symptoms that people are experiencing? Another thing, and by Western, I'm not just talking about the all of West. I'm specifically talking, addressing what's going on in the US. So in the US, because of healthcare costs and things like that, what has happened is that in order for people to get treatment, they use health insurance. And in order to get health insurance, they have to have some kind of a diagnosis. And in
Hmm.
order to have a diagnosis, you look at the symptoms. You're like, okay, they meet this, criteria. So they are now, bipolar or borderline or whatever.
Mhm.
So a lot of the, looking at the symptoms and giving people diagnoses kind of
Mhm.
stems from not just how it's being treated, but also how it's being paid. So
Yeah.
insurance kind of dictates that. Um, Now, the father of psychology is Sigmund
Mm.
Freud. And so Sigmund Freud was also very focused on the symptoms. So I think Western medicine in general, not just mental
Mhm.
health, but all medicine, focuses more on the symptom management, whereas Eastern, we focus
Mhm.
more on the source of the issue. So, whether it is
Yeah.
with your health, your physical health, or your mental health, we look at the source.
Mhm.
And in the East, we tend to take a more deeper view of what's going on. Whether
Mm.
it's okay. So if your stomach's upset, what's going
Yeah.
on with your doshas. We look at
Mm.
that stuff, which in the West, there's nothing like that. So
Um,
they basically will look at. okay, you have these symptoms, you should take this medication and it should cure you. And for the most part, it does, especially with
Hmm.
physical medicine, it does cure
Yeah.
you. But for mental health, what we are finding now is more and more that the treating the symptoms is not
Hmm.
enough. And so we are getting to a place, even in the West, where people are asking questions
Hmm.
about how can we get beyond just treating symptoms? How can we live healthier and happier lives, symptom free, but also start before there are any symptoms? How can we be healthy all along? And that requires a more holistic approach of looking at
Hmm.
things.
That's really really true. That's very true. Thank you for sharing this. It's a great understanding for the listeners for sure, definitely. And um, also on this, like in your work, how do you integrate both the perspectives, like to create a lasting transformations?
Sure.
Mhm.
So in the US, most of the psychology
Mhm.
training, at least while I was going to school, was
Mhm.
based in cognitive behavioral. So, cognitive means the mind, the brain, and then
Mhm.
behavior is behavior, your action. So it stemmed from that. However, I've been practicing for a very long time, like you said, 30 plus years. And what is happening in the field, and certainly for me, is
Mhm.
that I have moved further and further away from just looking at cognitive behavioral or using just those kind of theories. And
Mhm.
even in the Western world, there are different theories like ACT, which stands for acceptance and commitment therapy,
Mhm.
DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. These are all starting to use a lot of the Eastern philosophies. So mindfulness and meditation. These are the things that are sort of seeping into
Mhm.
the Western theoretical orientation. So as far as using both Western and Eastern, what
Mhm.
I I think the transition for me is so organic and natural that it's hard to really kind of dissect it and say, oh, this is when I make the shift from Western way of thinking to Eastern way of
Mhm.
thinking. It's who I am. I at the core, I'm an Eastern person because that's how I
Yeah.
grew up, but my education, higher education, has been in the West. So the integration and the melding of the two is just so organic and natural that it's hard to even say when I make that switch.
Mhm.
But I think if I were to look at some specific things, then I would say I will ask, like when I'm giving people maybe homework, to do, like
Yeah.
I would say, okay, I'd like for you to do some meditation. And why is that important? So explaining that helps people understand that, I'm not just telling them sit in a room and do om.
Mhm.
There's so many research studies now that are showing the effectiveness of meditation, the effectiveness of yoga, the effectiveness of pranayama. So,
Mhm.
these things have validity. So in when working with Western clients, I do have to somehow sometimes show the research and say, these are the research that shows that these things do work, and
Yeah.
then prescribe those kind of practices for them.
Mhm.
So I will say, for instance, anxiety is a really good one. Most people with anxiety. So there's a
Mhm.
saying that you cannot think yourself out of the problem of overthinking. So
Exactly.
cognitive therapy is thinking therapy. If you have a problem of overthinking, which is anxiety, your mind is
Mhm.
racing constantly, you cannot think yourself out of it.
Yeah.
So you have to do something different. And that something different happens to be breath work, it happens to be pranayama, it happens to
Mm.
be meditation, it happens to be focusing on your body. And in the West, we are now seeing more and more and more therapists starting to turn towards somatic psychology, which is basically a holistic way of looking at ourselves, not just
Mm.
as we are not just human, minds, we are human beings with a whole system of mind,
True.
body, spirit. And so we have to take all those into account.
Exactly. That's so rightly said. I mean, is very, very important also, I have to say. And um so when you mentioned about breathe work and the meditation for sure. So you emphasize the importance of healing, not just the mind, but also the whole being.
Yes.
So so if you can share like why practices like yoga, which is very, very, I mean, which is the originator in from India. So
Yeah.
like practices like yoga, breathe work, and the meditation are essential in the mental health. I mean, if
Yes.
you can share.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying,
Mm,
we are complete beings. We are not
mm,
just mind. We have our mind, we have our bodies, we also have what,
mm,
an easy way to say it would be the soul, the
mm.
spirit. So we've got to work with all of that. We cannot
Yeah.
just work with one and leave the other one out. So I'll give you a little example.
Mm,
Um, if I asked you to think about, or rather, let's do it this way. I want you to make a really big frown on your face.
okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
make a frown and hold that frown like you are
Uh,
really, really upset.
mm-hmm.
Now I want you to think about a beautiful little baby.
Okay.
So hold the frown and picture this gorgeous, beautiful, laughing, giggling baby.
Mm.
What happens to your frown?
It will come down.
You start smiling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So your mind and your body is connected.
Mm.
You cannot just take care of one and leave the other one out. So
Yeah.
there is a way of looking at it is the top down or bottom up. Top down means from your head, your brain to your body, and bottom up is from your body to your brain. So
Mm.
what we know is that we can work both ways, and we need to work both ways. So pranayama, which is the
Mm.
practice, breathing practices, there are, alternate nostril breathing, and there are different other belly breaths and things like that. Those practices help calm our nervous system down.
Mm.
And when our nervous system is calmed down, it has an effect on our brains.
True.
It has an effect on our minds, and it calms our mind down.
Exactly.
When we
Oh.
visualize something, like I said, visualize that beautiful baby,
Mm.
it has an effect on your body.
Yes.
So what yoga has all these different, branches of yoga, and
Mhm.
asana is just the physical exercise. And what in the West people really took to asana, it became
Mm.
this physical, you can lose weight by doing yoga, this, that, the other. But there's so much more to yoga. Yoga is not
Mm.
just asana. Asana is one. Then we have pranayama, which is the breathing practices. Then we have dhyana, which is meditation. And then
Mm.
the sister science of yoga is Ayurveda. So we work with all of this together to heal the person. But we
Wow.
also have to look at who the person is first. And that
Mm.
is where we look at the doshas, what is their
Yes.
constitution? What is their physical, mental constitution?
Mm.
And we work with that.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. And also, I'm very curious. Like, have you seen have you seen the cases where traditional talk therapy alone wasn't enough? I mean, um, it's not the only one, but adding these practices made a kind of breakthrough. So,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Absolutely. So I would say for most of my clients, I do prescribe breathing exercises and meditation. Um,
okay.
and I would also prescribe yoga to them. I just don't do that in my office setting because in the
Mhm,
US, you have some very strict kind of rules about
mhm.
touching your clients and things like that. As a
Oh,
psychotherapist, I'm not allowed to touch my clients, physical touch. So,
mm,
so as far as doing physical yoga in my office, I don't do that, but I do prescribe it to them. So, for instance, someone who is feeling very lethargic and
mm,
very low, I would probably ask them to do bellows breath, which is a kind of
okay.
breathing exercise where they are breathing in and breathing out kind of with force. And
Mm,
what that does, it pulls in oxygen, it oxygenates your blood,
mm,
and oxygenated blood essentially gives you energy.
yeah.
So I would prescribe something like that. For someone who is anxious, I would prescribe alternate nostril breathing because what we know is that alternate nostril breathing actually helps calm down your nervous system.
Mm,
So I would practice that. Those things I would practice in my session with them. And then I would prescribe that to them when they go home that, okay, I need for you to do this so many times a week.
it's amazing. Yeah.
And these are
Mhm,
now with all the Western sort of experiments and the scientific way of sort of validating things is like you
mhm,
have to do research and you have to, and they're doing that, and now they're finding that all these centuries and centuries and centuries old knowledge is very, very valid and accurate. So
yeah.
now the West is a lot more comfortable using these kind of ways of doing things or treating things than they were before. It's not just about sitting and doing, oh.
Exactly. Wow. Amazing. It's really, really great. Thank you so much for sharing this. And also, like for someone who is feeling overwhelmed by the stress or maybe the emotional struggles, what's the one powerful shift they can make right now to move towards true healing? What do you say?
So, emotional stress and struggle
Mm-hmm.
essentially comes from overthinking.
Okay.
And, overthinking, and also not just overthinking, but overthinking typically about the future. So,
Mm-hmm.
what we know is that when we focus too much on the past, we tend to have regrets,
Mm-hmm.
disappointments, and depression. So, depression
Yeah.
is a over focus on the past.
Mm.
Anxiety and overwhelm is an over focus on the future. What's going to happen next? What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
How is it going to turn out? So when we focus too much on the past or too much on the future, we tend to have these problems. So when you're
Mm.
feeling overwhelmed about your life, what you
Mm.
might be doing is you might be focusing too much on the future.
Exactly.
So it's important to have a plan for the future. I'm not saying by
Mm.
any means that you shouldn't have a plan, but over focusing on it is not going to do you any good. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of, in Buddhism, there's a saying that work like your life depends on it and then let
Mm-hmm.
go of the outcome. I grant,
Yeah.
it's granted that it's not easy to do, but that is what you have to work towards is that
Mm.
I'm going to work as hard as I can, but I don't have control over the outcome.
Yes.
If I know that I've done everything in my power, then I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
let go of the outcome and I'm going to focus on the present moment.
True.
Because in the present moment, there's nothing wrong. When we focus on the present moment, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
It's usually the past or the future that brings us
Mm.
psychological, mental, emotional challenges.
That's
The other
amazing.
thing that I would
Yeah.
say is to do alternate nostril breathing or
Mm-hmm.
some deep breathing, belly breathing, because that calms your nervous system down.
Mm-hmm.
So focusing on your breath. developing a daily meditation practice, even if it's for 5 minutes. And,
Exactly.
oftentimes people think meditation means you blank your mind. That's not right. What you're doing in meditation is you're just noticing what's
Hmm.
going through your mind and not getting hooked by it. So,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'm thinking about dinner. All right, let that
Hmm.
go. Oh, now I'm thinking about my dog. Okay, let that go. Now I'm thinking about the bills I have to pay. Okay, let
Hmm.
that go. So just notice what's going on instead of getting pulled into it where your
Hmm.
emotions get involved. So you become the seer, you become the observer of your thoughts.
Exactly. That's amazing, I have to say. And dear listeners, I know time is the constraint. I definitely wanted to talk much more in deep details about it. And when we have Amita, so definitely we can expect these uh, these knowledge, and knowledge sharing is always the best, dear listeners. So with this Amita, like before we wrap, like if someone wants to connect with you, how they can connect?
Sure. So I am very, very easily accessible. I
Mhm.
answer my own phone. I
Okay.
respond to my own emails. So my email is resolve,
Mhm.
resolve dot counseling at gmail.com. And my phone
Mhm.
number is US. So it's 1-859-391-1255. And my website is www.consultamita.com. So those will all, get you to me one way or the other. And if I am able to, and I'm just going to share this and you can, delete it if you need to, but I am bringing a group of psychotherapists to India in October. And if you are interested in coming with us, please get in touch with me. We are going to be doing some trainings on yogic and Buddhist psychology and Ayurveda for mental health.
Mm.
So that's me.
Exactly.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
That's great. That's really great, Amita. I mean, this is really an eye-opening conversation. And I have to say, for the listeners, like mental health isn't just about managing the symptoms. It's the true healing happens when we reconnect with our whole being. Like as Amita has also mentioned, like it's all about whole being. So if today's episode has resonated with all of you, then be sure to follow Amita's work and explore these practices for yourself. And also, there is a great opportunity to meet and learn with Amita when she already mentioned about her plan for India. So you can definitely look into this. I'll try to share all the links into the show notes for your easy reference, dear listeners. And also, do not forget to subscribe to Healthy Mind and Healthy Life and share this episode. And also remember that healthy mind begins, or healing begins, when you look beyond the mind and into the heart. So, with this hope, until next time, stay mindful, stay open, and keep healing. So, thank you so much.